and welcome to this another episode of ECCB Connects. Governor Timothy N.J. Antoine continued his country outreach mission to ECCB member countries with visits to Antigua and Barbuda from 21 to 23 February. The visit commenced with a courtesy call on Governor General His Excellency Sir Rodney Williams, followed by presentations to the members of Cabinet, Leader of the Opposition and members of his party, the Antigua Bankers Association, social partners including trade union representatives, and the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. The key issues which were raised during the discussions with those groups included the need to improve access to finance for small to medium-sized businesses, the regulation of the quick cash and non-bank lending agencies, consolidation of the banking sector, and improving the doing business environment nationally and regionally. Governor Antoine also met with media practitioners. They raised questions related to the ECCU Credit Bureau, the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation, why the ECCB is concerned with fiscal and debt sustainability, how growth can trickle down to the people, access to credit, and how the ECCU can benefit from U.S. tax reform. In this episode of ECCB Connects, we bring you part one of the governor's engagement with the media in Antigua and Barbuda.
Garfield Burford, ABS Television. You mentioned in the IMF's projections in their January 2018 World Economic Outlook that global growth is expected to pick up this year and next year 3.9%, pushed mainly by the growth in the U.S. economy, which is pushed by the tax reform policies. But the IMF in that outlook says the tax reform policies, the kind of growth that it's going to spur in the U.S. is going to be ephemeral. It's not going to last beyond perhaps 2022. It's a short window of opportunity for growth. How do you think the ECCU can leverage and to capitalize on that short window of growth during this period?
Given the large diaspora communities we have in the U.S., I think we have to take advantage of the opportunity, even if it's for a short time. And the way we see it is that it's very important for us to obviously continue to see remittances flow. More disposable income in the hands of our citizens in the U.S. mean, in theory, they should be able to increase their remittances to the region. But even before that, tourism. Tourism is our main business. And we would hope that with effective marketing in the U.S. at this time, we will in fact be able to see increase in arrivals. So we'd want to see that in Antigua and Barbuda and across the currency union. Cruise tourism has been doing pretty well, and we expect that to continue, but we do want to see spillover increase because of course that's where even more money is spent in the economy and it brings more benefits to the local economy. The other area would be foreign direct investment. Now, the truth is that a lot of the foreign direct investment that we've seen in recent times have come from the CIP or through the CIP. And that's why those programs are so important for our region at this time. But it is our hope that with the situation in the U.S., we may also see some of those funds flowing our way in terms of investment, whether that is in tourism, energy, ICT, light manufacturing, or services. So growth in the U.S. generally means good news for us. And we just need to make sure we tap those opportunities. So making sure we have good flight access, airline access, making sure that we continue to work on the business environment, because when people get here, you want to make sure that they can spend and that we are facilitating and we're ready to do business. That's why the business environment is important. So when they actually come and they're ready to do business, we are ready for them.
Do you think that to compete effectively, the ECCU should consider providing an incentive to attract more foreign direct investment by cutting tax rates, possibly corporate tax rates across the ECCU?
I think we need to look at it. I certainly am of the view that all corporate tax rates would need to come down. Right now, they range from a high of about 33% to I think about 25%. Now, I am very careful because tax rates are really the domain of the governments. That's fiscal policy. And therefore, the governments have to determine what is in their best interest based on their fiscal needs. But I certainly think from the point of view of competitiveness that it makes sense for us to look at lowering our corporate tax rates and perhaps accompanying that with also the removal of certain loopholes in the tax system. So that in a net sense, we do not lose revenue, but we make ourselves more attractive for business. At the end of the day, you want to create jobs and create opportunities.
We've seen good reports of Antigua's macroeconomic performance. My question is, what is your advice to the government on having that trickle down to the people? How do the people feel that this growth is real?
Well, you know, for us, growth has to be inclusive, and a big part of inclusive growth is employment. And for us, what we also want to see is employment opportunities being created so that more and more people are getting a share of the pie, as it were. Our encouragement, therefore, is to continue to work with social partners, work with labor unions, work with the community to make sure that the development of the country benefits as many as possible. That's why when we talk about the business environment, we want to make sure that you remove those impediments that hold up progress, because sometimes projects take too long. They take too long to start. And when you look at the reasons why, whether it's planning permission, whether it is just the bureaucracy of the state, those are things which delay the delivery of development impact on the ground. So our advice would be to engage. This is why, for example, we make a point of meeting with all of our social partners when we do this approach. Our thinking is to engage with the labor unions, because at the end of the day, you have to work with the workers of the country. You have to raise productivity in the country, because part of how you grow the economy is not just projects, but it's also growing productivity using your existing labor force. And to do that, it really requires an effective dialogue between management and staff, employer and employee, government and labor unions, and of course business, that tripartite approach. So that is one thing I would certainly want to encourage the country to push forward on.
A follow-up on that, Governor, the matter of, well, you deal with monetary policy, but in terms of fiscal incentives for growth, what more do you think the government could then do to further incentivize growth in the economy so that there's a greater multiplier effect in terms of fiscal policy?
Well, I think on fiscal incentives, a comprehensive review is probably in order. I'm not sure when last Antigua and Barbuda did a comprehensive review. I would encourage that be done. One of the things that I speak now with some experience as a former financial secretary, is that our region is used to giving some very long tax holidays. I am minded to move away from that and move towards a system where we give a facility where you get a write-off, a tax write-off for actual expenditure. In other words, rather than give you simply a 20 or 25-year holiday, you get a write-off against actual expenditure, actual investment. Sometimes we hear a business is going to invest $50 million and create 500 jobs, for example. And sometimes that's not always the case, but they get the tax breaks. And my view is that you need to hold them accountable by saying, as you put in the investment, we'll give you the tax relief. So it's tied to the investment, rather than committing to a long-term tax holiday and you are not delivering on your end of the bargain. And that's something I see across the countries, not just here in Antigua and Barbuda. In fact, I'm more familiar with other countries where obviously I've worked. But that's an area I think, in terms of improving the tax system, I would look to fix that, so that the country gets the benefit of the investment, and of course the investor gets the benefit of the relief if he or she makes the investment.
Apart from the corporate income tax incentive that could be given, another area that you mentioned was the matter of access to capital, or private capital availability, access to capital for the private sector. You mentioned this guarantee of possibly 75%, that would be huge. But how do you get the banks to have a greater or less risk aversion so that they are more inclined to lend? Because that's a major challenge that we have, that the banks are more liquid here in Antigua and Barbuda and elsewhere across the ECCU, a far cry from what existed before. How do you get them to have this less risk aversion so that there is more private capital and access to capital?
I think it's a couple of the things that we're doing now. The fact that, for example, we're doing the credit bureau, that's important, because the banks will tell you, in modern economies or advanced economies, you have credit bureaus and credit registries. That is a facility that allows the bank to assess and price risk. Absent that here, is more difficult for the bank. So while we obviously tell the banks you need to do more, we also have to be careful because at the end of the day, the banks have our deposits, right? And they have to make sure they lend with care. A facility such as the Credit Bureau, which is what we're working on now, will in fact give them more, empower them to better assess and in a faster way, an effective way, make a determination. The partial credit guarantee scheme to which you just referred will incentivize them because they know that their risk is being reduced so that they stand to lose less. And therefore, people who are on the periphery, on the margins looking in, outside looking in, may now hopefully get into the credit space because the bank has a partner in the Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation that will work with the bank. And not just banks. We hope that credit unions and other financial institutions will become eligible to also participate in the guarantee. But I think it's also important for us to continue to diversify, which is why our goal says strong, diversified, and resilient financial sector. The reality is that our financial system is still too narrow. It's very bank-centric. We need to see other instruments like the partial credit guarantee, like venture capital funds, like mutual funds. And we also need to see more people invest in the stock exchange. How many people in Antigua and Barbuda invested in the stock exchange? How many people in the ECCU? I suspect it's less than 10%. If we can get more of our people not just to save, but to invest, now you would argue some of them say, well, we invest in business, we invest in real estate. That is true, but those have their risk. If we can get more offerings, the average ECCU citizen can invest in the stock market quite easily and can expect to create wealth from that market as a matter of course, and create more opportunities for themselves, their families, and obviously their countries. So the banks have their role, but it's not just the banks. And I don't think our strategy going forward can rely solely on banks doing their part, because that's why you have commercial banks, you have development banks, you have merchant banks. Sometimes we ask too much of our banks. And the fact of the matter is they can't serve all the needs of the financial system.
You're watching ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region. To view any episode of ECCB Connects anytime, any place, at your convenience, check us out on YouTube or Facebook at ECCB Connects.
Here's where we end this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Join us again next week when we'll bring you part 2 of Governor Antoine's engagement with the media in Antigua and Barbuda. See you then.